Hugo Strange. He is a Doctor Strange.
Doctor Strange. Yeah, that's Doctor Strange, right?
No, so there's DC Doctor Strange, and then there's the Marvel one, which is the Hugo Strange. Yeah. But he's got like the circular glasses. He's bald head. Usually like some sort of white coat. Okay. So, let's see, how should we start? What kind of car did Jesus drive?
I know the apostles drove an Accord.
Jesus?
Yes, the Accord. No, Jesus actually drove a Chrysler.
What? Say it again, bro.
A Chrysler.
Good one, man. Good one.
You know, Moses had a motorcycle.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, his Triumph was heard throughout the land. I got a million of them, unfortunately.
Well, Jesus at the Last Supper, he asked the server if he could be seated at a table for 22, because we're all going to sit on one side.
No, that was Da Vinci. Well, it's more like Da Vinci's illustration.
That's funny. Still leaves too short, though.
Yeah.
12 plus him is 13.
Oh, 13. So
26.
26.
Sorry, logical math.
No, yeah, that's good. Yeah, why did I think there was 10? 10 disciples. No. 12.
One for every nation.
Paul took Judas' place. Depending on how you look at it. I left it one right after.
Did you make any changes between last week and this week?
I did.
The PowerPoint you uploaded isn't opening up in the PowerPoint.
Oh, it's not? Well, what I can do is, do you have access to the church email?
Yep.
Okay. What I will do is, I'll send you an email that should have a connection to the new one. So, Cornerstone.
I feel like that.
All right, it should have sent. The email, that is. All right, so while we're waiting, just a refresher on what we talked about last week. We started in Caesarea Philippi, which is to the far north. This was the area where Peter recognized Jesus as being the Son of God. And the location itself is actually one of the three major sources of the Jordan River. A lot of the rain comes down off of Mount Harmon and will pool down into this area, which will create the start of the river. And then from Caesarea Philippi, It is about 40 miles to Mount Tabor, which is thought to be the location of the site of the Transfiguration. They figure that because 6 days, 40 miles seems pretty consistent, for a walking distance. And that area was more inclined to have, Jews and Romans that were thought to be potential followers or would be followers of Jesus, because once he came down from the mount, he was met by a large crowd, and they think that was more logical that had taken place in that location. So, so Mount Tabor, and we talked about the current church that's there. And then from there, we're going to start talking about Jericho. And Jericho actually is one of the, I think it's the oldest inhabited city in the world. Now, the actual old city of Jericho is all ruins. The new city has been built up around that location. But yeah, it's really interesting to think of how much history had taken place, in that area. Jericho is known as the city of palm trees. It's been described that in the book of Deuteronomy and the book of Judges. And it's just 15 miles northeast of Jerusalem. At the time of Jesus, it was known as an oasis city because a lot of the surrounding area is all desert. And so this was one of the few areas where there was springs that had come up from underground. And, with the warm climate and the freshwater springs, there'd be palm trees that would grow. And Herod the Great actually built his winter palace here so that, that's where he would kind of spend some of his time away from his palace. He actually had several palaces, but that was one of the locations. And Jericho was actually the first city in Canaan that was conquered by the Israelites when they, actually had left Egypt and come up and around the Dead Sea. So a lot of things had happened in this location. If I could have some readers, we're going to turn to Luke once the PowerPoint catches up with us. So Luke, it is, yes. Luke 18, I would like a reader, 35 through 43. Okay, and then we'll also have another reader, Luke 19, 1 through 10. David, okay, great. Sure.
Now as Jesus was approaching Jericho, a man who was blind was sitting by the road begging. But when he heard a crowd going by, he began inquiring what this was. They told him that Jesus of Nazareth was passing by, and he called out, saying, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. Those who led the way were sternly telling him to be quiet, but he kept crying out all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus stopped and commanded that he be brought to him. And when he came near, he asked him, what do you want me to do for you? And he said, Lord, I want to regain my sight. And Jesus said to him, regain your sight, your faith has made you well. And immediately he regained his sight and began following him, glorifying God. And when all the people saw it, they praised God.
Great, thank you. And then David, could you read Luke 19?
Yep. Jesus entered Jericho and made his way through the town. There was a man there named Zacchaeus. He was the chief tax collector in the region, and he had become very rich. He tried to get a look at Jesus, but he was too short. Sorry for that. He was too short to see over the crowd, so he ran ahead and climbed up a fig tree beside the road, for Jesus was going to pass that way. When Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and called him by his name. Zacchaeus, he said, quick, come down. I must be a guest at your home today. Zacchaeus quickly climbed down and took Jesus to his home in great excitement and joy, but the people were displeased. He has gone to be a guest at Notoriety the sinner. They grumbled. Meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said, I will give half my wealth to the poor, Lord, and if I have cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much. Then Jesus responded, salvation has come to this home today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save those who are lost.
Great, thank you.
That's the end of that story.
Perfect. So the two stories that were described, it's interesting because, well, Jesus came to Jericho. The blind man sought him out and asked for healing, and Jesus, provided sight to him once again. And if we look back to the Old Testament, Jericho actually was the location where the last king of Judah, Zedekiah, he was captured and later bound in chains, and then taken to Babylon. And you can read that story in 2 Kings 25. Zedekiah did what was evil in the Lord's sight and led to the fall of Jerusalem to Babylon. And by doing so, he actually lost his own sight in the process. So his lack of faith condemned him. And so Jesus comes to Jericho now, and here's a blind man, and Jesus actually provides sight. He gives back, your faith has rewarded you. So it's interesting how, God can take away and, God can give back. And then when we talk about Zacchaeus, Zacchaeus was a tax collector, and he himself was known to be a sinful man. And he climbs a sycamore tree, which has very thick foliage. In fact, here's a picture of a sycamore tree. And, the symbology of that, if you're climbing into a tree, you want to see, but very likely you don't want to be seen, because of the thick foliage. And so, how often as sinners, do we want to see, but we don't want people to really see us either, all the time. But Jesus saw him, and, he gave him a chance for redemption and salvation, So, we're all sinners. We want to hide in our trees, but, Jesus sees us, and, he wants to help us. He wants to heal us. So, we should open our hearts to him. All right, and then from Jericho, we are going to the Wadi Quelt. I don't have it. Okay, the Wadi Quelt.
So comparatively, how much ground did you cover? I mean, like from here to Spokane?
Oh, well, I mean,
Say.
we were there for 12 days, 10 to 12 days. And
How long is it from from the area around Galilee down to like
Jerusalem.
Jericho, Jerusalem?
Oh, it'd probably be like 45 minutes, 60 minutes. Or not, yeah, not super far.
And are there speed limits?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I think so.
Did you
I
say
mean,
were?
No.
to be honest,
What are the speed limits?
what are the speed limits? I'm not sure. I wasn't driving, so. But, we flew into Tel Aviv, and then we spent the night there, and then we went up to Caesarea Maritima, and then we went up to Hafia. And then from there, where did we stay? Oh, we stayed at Nazareth, and then we did a lot of the areas around there. And then from Nazareth, we were coming down to Jerusalem, and so we spent a lot of time, kind of going along the Jordan River, which there's not really a lot to see going along the Jordan River. It's all desert, a lot of hills.
Well, a basin, right? Valley.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's really hard to give you time frames because it's like you're bouncing back and forth, and our tour guide was like, oh, this is a better thing to see in the morning, when the crowds are low, and then we're going to go to this place. And it's like, you just get on a bus, and they take you somewhere. And it's not until...
That's all you got to worry about. Get on the bus.
And then it's not until you come home where you're like piecing together, oh, yeah, okay, I was over here that day, and then, oh, yeah, I was over there. So, yeah, as much as I'd like to answer, I don't really know. It just all blended together.
I imagine the only reason why it would take like a day to get from one place to another is if there's a whole bunch of like security checkpoints to have to get through.
Yeah. Which, as you get to Jerusalem, yeah, because you're going back and forth between the West Bank and, Israel. So, all right, so Wadi Kelt. Now this is also known as the Valley of the Shadow of Death, which actually comes from a well-known verse in Psalm 23. In fact,
I could read the whole entire thing.
Oh, perfect.
Psalm 23. If I remember correctly, it starts off as just read it. 23. Okay. Psalm 23. Want me to read all of it, or?
Yeah, it's not that long.
The Lord is my shepherd, I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths. Brings me honor to his name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of mine enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup runneth overflows with blessing. Surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever.
Great, thank you. So yeah, that particular version says the darkest valley. Other translations would say,
Shadow of the Valley of Death.
yes, yeah. And so this, let's see if we have some pictures. Yeah, so it, you basically have a lot of desert, and within the desert, when it does rain, all the rain will pour down into this valley, and so that's really the only source of water that you have. That's where the vegetation, will take place, and there's a small path that was kind of built up that people would walk back and forth between Jerusalem and Jericho. And so usually, people from the north, when they're coming down to Jerusalem, for the festivals and to do their sacrifices, they'd have to travel through that particular valley. And because that's where the water was, and that's where people are traveling, that's also a very common place for, highland people, the thieves to prey on caravans going back and forth. And so caravans often, you try to strengthen your numbers, so oftentimes you'd meet in Jericho and you'd try to build up your group, and then you'd put a group of men in front, to lead the caravan. Typically the women and the children would be in the middle, and then you'd have another group of men in the back, to protect yourself, as you're traveling through this area. And so this area also is known to be where the parable of the Good Samaritan took place. And so if I could have another reader, we can read that. Oh, perfect.
And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tested him, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And he said to him, What is written in the law? What is your reading of it? So he answered and said, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, You have answered rightly. Do this, and you will live. But he wanted to justify himself, said to Jesus, And who is my neighbor? And Jesus answered and said, A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, who stripped him of his clothes, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a certain priest came down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise, a Levi, when he arrived at that place, he came and looked and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. So he went to him and bandaged his wounds, poured on oil and wine, and he set him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. On the next day, when he departed, he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said to him, Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will come again, and I will repay you. So which of those 3 do you think was neighbor to him who fell among thieves? And he said, He who shows mercy on him. And Jesus said to him, Go and do likewise.
Great, thank you. So the first 2 people that had passed by, this half-dead person, laying in the road, there was a priest and there was a Levite, both people of, holy orders. And, you would think that those people, because they're charged, to live a life for God, that, they should stop and, they should help others. But like I was alluding to earlier, this is a pathway between Jericho and Jerusalem. And so very likely, those people were going to Jerusalem to either, help out with the festival or, you know, to do sacrifices. And so, you know, we know that the Jews, they had a very strict law that you're not supposed to touch unclean things. And so if you see somebody that's beaten up on the road, and hey, you got a responsibility, you know, in Jerusalem, you know, well, maybe I don't really want to touch him because that will make me unclean, and then I can't do my responsibilities in Jerusalem. Well, I mean, that makes sense, but, you know, Jesus is saying, well, you know, you think you have responsibilities, but you really need to kind of reevaluate your priorities. Because, yeah, the priests, you know, you think you have to do these sacrifices, but honestly, you really should be serving your fellow man. Yeah.
Did they actually believe that helping Samaritans was unfulfilled? I mean, did they teach that in the churches or the synagogue? They did. So they were pretty conservative.
And just the fact that he was beat up, probably bleeding, and you know, you're not supposed to touch unclean things. And certainly the Gentiles.
But
Yeah.
Jewish blood was considered clean.
No, no.
Like,
It didn't matter.
I know that the women weren't, but I always considered that was because they needed, it was good to let them rest during that time, which is wisdom, I would think,
Sure.
especially on God's part. But, but I just wasn't sure about if somebody actually got injured.
Yeah.
They were bleeding. I never thought about that.
Yeah. Yeah, they would have special areas that, you know, people would have to, you know, isolate themselves until they could, you know, the crust could take place, and then, you know.
Sorry, son, there's bones sticking out and you're bleeding. I can't touch you right now, you're unclean.
Well, so that's the thing, you know, it's like, well, where do you place your priority? You know, is it to do your service, you know, as a Levite, you know, to,
Right.
you know, or should I actually help my fellow man? Jesus is saying, help your fellow man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Set that bone.
Right. You know, help them.
I saw it as a holy man, a legal man, and a common man. I see it as that. So a holy man walked down, passed by it. A legal man went down and passed by it. A common man went down and helped him out.
Yeah. I mean, you could certainly look at it that way. At least my translation says a priest, you know, a Levite.
And a Samaritan, which is basically a half.
But the point is, you know, help each other. That's the point. Now, a couple other things before we move on. So Jericho, yeah, like I said, it's about 14 miles, you know, to Jerusalem. And so that's roughly, you know, you can travel about 10 miles in a day as long as you're not inhibited. So it's about a day's journey to Jerusalem. And so looking back in early Luke, Luke actually told the story of when Jesus was 12 years old and accidentally left behind, you know, at the temple. And so, you know, Mary and Joseph, they likely made it to about the Jericho area when they were coming back, when they realized that he was missing. And so then they had to, you know, double back, you know, take another day to get back, probably another day to find him. And I think it was on the third day that they found him in the temple.
Did they build a church there?
They did not build a church.
Church with the assumption he was with us?
No, that one in particular, they did not do. But yeah, so just to kind of give you an idea of, you know, spatial relationship, you know, that's likely kind of the area that they realized that happened. Other biblical events that are believed to have occurred here, 2 Samuel, you know, from our Wednesday dive deep into the Bible. You know, King David's conflict with his son Absalom and David fleeing, into the wilderness, this is the wilderness. This is likely where he had fled, towards Jericho. And then I mentioned Zedekiah's battle with the Babylonians. That's where he had was taken captive. And then just now we talked about Jesus traveling from Jericho to Jerusalem. And kind of hard to see, but yeah, there's a little monastery that was built into the rock, along the valley. And this is this was first established in the Byzantine period in the 420s, and then was reorganized as a monastery around 500 A.D.
By Dr. Strange.
Was destroyed by the Persians in 1614, and then was later rebuilt in the 12th century by the Crusaders, and then was later abandoned after their defeat, and then rebuilt again by Greek monks in the 19th century. And it's currently maintained by Greek Orthodox monks. So there's a road here, and so yeah, that's the road down there. And then if you look closely, there's stairs that go up here, stairs. And then there's like a path that kind of goes above, and then there's also a path that goes down through here. Yeah, and so we're standing in front of it here, and then yeah, that path will continue on. This way goes towards Jerusalem. But it takes quite a bit of effort, I would imagine, to walk from Jerusalem all the way up to here. Bring your water.
Camel pack in your camel.
All right, and then...
That's his, did you actually go through that?
No, we just drove. Yeah. That would have been cool. But I think, our group of the majority, being in their older years would not have been happy.
You could have pushed them, but
Yeah.
getting them back up would be difficult.
Yeah, but it would have been cool to go down there. I would have loved that. I didn't see anybody walking around down there, but...
I think it might be for sale. Laura, is that for sale? Because I'm sure she's on, like, Zillow or whatever, looking to see if it's for sale.
There's no way that I would live through that. Thank you.
You'd be safe in it. I mean, I know you don't want to go to Israel, but you'd be safe in your own castle/monastery. Sunny and warm. You get the evening shade.
Well, sunny and warm. Sounds like fun for you, Mom.
Start the Church of Joe.
And he would be able to go to Starbucks.
What?
You won't be able to go to Starbucks.
Oh, start one.
No.
All right, so continuing the journey, following Jesus. So he made it through the valley, and now we've made it to Jerusalem. And just like Jericho, Jerusalem is one of the oldest cities in the world. And it's a prized commodity, between the major religions. A lot of people have come together and basically have claimed that all the holy things that have ever happened, mostly happened in this area. So, you got Judaism, Christianity, Islam, basically all fighting for space, amongst the land here. And because it is in such high acclaim, yeah, there's certainly been a lot of fights over the years, and certainly ongoing. And, it was interesting. I was looking, just for some facts about the city. And so they quoted this book, Eric H. Klein's tally in Jerusalem Besieged. The city's been destroyed at least twice, besieged 23 times, captured and recaptured 44 times, and attacked 52 times. So a lot of fighting has taken place over this this area of land. And we have a lot to talk about, but we're not going to go through all this. You know, the main one I want to focus on is Matthew 21, 1 through 17, the triumphal entry. If I could have a reader. Whoever gets to it first.
Matthew 21, verse
1 through 17.
1 through 17. As Jesus and his disciples approached Jerusalem, they came to the town of Bethphage. On the mountain of Olives, Jesus set two of them on ahead. Go into the village over there, he said. As soon as you enter it, you will see a donkey tied there with its colt beside it. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone asks what you are doing, just say, the Lord needs them, and he will immediately let you take them. This took place to fulfill the prophecy that said, tell the people of Jerusalem, look, your king is coming to you. He's humble, riding on a donkey's coat. The two disciples did as Jesus commanded. They brought the donkey and the colt to him and drew their garments over the colt, and he sat on it. Most of the crowd spread their garments on the road ahead of him, and others cut branches off the trees and spread them on the road. Jesus was in the center of the procession, and the people all around him were shouting, praise God for the Son of David, blessing on him, on the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Praise God in highest heaven. This is all the way up to 10? Oh, no, 17.
Yeah, just go to 10. And then
Okay.
we'll, yeah, go ahead.
The entire city of Jerusalem was in an uproar as he entered. Who is this? They asked. And the crowd, sorry, I have to go to 11.
Oh, yeah.
And the crowds replied, it is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee.
Perfect. So there's another story that we'll talk about cleansing the temple next time, because it is getting close to 11. But I did want to show, the triumphal entry. This picture here is the last bit of, the retaining wall of, that was known as the Temple Mount. And so this is described as the Wailing Wall, because the wailing description stems from Jewish practice of coming to the site and mourning the destruction of the temple, and the fact that they're still waiting, for, the ability to construct their new temple, to this area. And the Wailing Wall, the area in front of the wall has a status of a synagogue, and so it's treated with the highmost respect. And men and married women are expected to cover their heads upon approaching the wall and to address appropriately. And so there's actually little stations that you can stop in to get a little yarmulke, to cover your head. And you can approach the wall that way. And then when you're departing the wall, it's custom to actually walk backwards from the wall to show, to show its sanctity. You shouldn't turn your back, on the holy spot, which I didn't know about, and I made many mistakes, and I felt terrible about, because I had the yarmulke on, and I walked towards the wall, and I was like, well, out of respect, you don't want to take the yarmulke off. But no, you shouldn't do that. Yeah. In fact, I took it off for a second, and my brother's like, put that back on. And I was like, oh, yeah. Put that back on. And then I turned around, and then I realized that everybody else was like backing up, facing the wall and then backing. So I made all the mistakes, and I felt terrible about it. But if you ever go, that's what you're supposed to do. Which I feel like they probably told us what we were supposed to do as we approached it, but maybe I wasn't listening, and, Americans. What's that?
Oh, they do that in voodoo and voodoo too.
Oh.
But different.
Gotcha.
So, you said married women and men.
And men, yeah.
So, is unmarried women and children not allowed to go there?
That I'm not sure about.
Did you see any children?
There were children there, yeah, but none of them really were approaching the wall. So I'm not really sure what the actual practice, of that would be. But I would imagine it would be the same. Yeah. On Saturdays, it's forbidden to enter the area with electronic devices, including cameras, and so they'll take those away from you.
So
The Sabbath, you mean?
On the Sabbath, yeah. Keeping. No, this was not on Saturday. Yeah.
So it'd be Friday night to Saturday night,
Mhm.
6 p.m.
Right.
That's included in the list of the many mistakes that you made.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
I
got
still
to
feel.
see the Jerusalem jail.
Yeah. Yeah. But certainly felt bad about it. In addition to that, you can see in the bottom picture, you have these little scraps of paper that are tucked in to the wall. And so it's common practice to place strips of paper containing written prayers and stuffing them into the crevices of the wall. And it's generally believed that prayer by the western wall is particularly beneficial because this, like I said earlier, this is the last part of the retaining wall that was adjacent to the Temple Mount. And so the Temple Mount was where the Holy of Holies was. And so the closer you can get your prayer to the Holy of Holies, God will,
What you really need to do is take them down with a rock to us.
Yeah, which we weren't able to do.
Drop your prayer somewhere in that edifice.
Mm.
That'd be right over the Holy.
Right. He's got to listen to that. But yeah, that's common practice, to write your prayer and place it in the wall. But yeah, it was a really cool experience, and yeah, I wish I would have listened to instructions, but hopefully God doesn't take it out on me. Oh, yeah, those are umbrellas.
Hot,
They let people
sunny.
Yeah. And it's a segregated wall. So the men's side is over here, and then the women's side is over here.
All synagogues are segregated.
Yeah. But you can see how there wasn't as many men as compared to the women. I don't know what that says about us. Working. But yeah, everybody's expected to cover their head. Okay, it is 11:05. We'll take up from here next time. Any questions about any of that? All right, would someone like to open us up in prayer?
Can I?
Sure.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this wonderful morning you've given us. Please forgive us when we fall short and fail you. And Lord, please help us to learn to communicate better and understand each other better and listen to the eyes and the mouth of our teacher. And Lord, help us to love one another and our neighbors better. Actually, sorry, can I beg you? So I'm going to say, Lord, remind us